With the costs of groceries, monthly bills, and all the other realities of life going up, well, that can make it hard to save for the future, hard to get ahead.
Food prices are set to go up again in Canada.
The average family of four will spend $16,833 on groceries next year, $800 more than they spent this year.
I kind of feel when you walk into a grocery store, you breathe and you've spent $100.
Stuff we used to sell for $5 10 years ago is now 10. Stuff we used to sell for $1.99 is now $3.99.
Meat shooting up between 4 to 6%, vegetables 3 to 5%, and bakery and dairy items 2 to 4%.
I don't eat meat that much. You know, meat's expensive.
People are trying to keep their lights on, pay their rent.
I mean, even people with money are tight. They're strapped.
Once you've been in power for 8+ years, it becomes harder and harder to blame the previous guys.
Calling on Justin Trudeau to resign. He has to go.
A shocking report claiming that Canada's financial situation has reached a critical point under Prime Minister Justin Trudeau's leadership has just emerged. According to the report, Canada's debt has gotten to alarming levels, and the government's fiscal policies are said to have placed the country on a dangerous path, pushing the economy toward financial collapse. With projections suggesting that Canada's debt-to-GDP ratio could get out of control in the coming years, this exposes an urgent need for immediate action. What does this mean for Canadians? Higher taxes? Reduced services? The report raises more questions than answers, but one thing is clear. The current state of Canada's economy is under serious criticism, and the consequences could be bad. Stay tuned as we unpack the details of this bombshell report and discuss the implications for every Canadian. Before we dive in, make sure to subscribe and hit the like button to stay updated on this developing story. It really means a lot to us and takes less than 1 second. As of the latest figures, Canada's debt has reached levels exceeding $1 trillion for the first time in history. This debt has been steadily growing over the past few years, with projections indicating that it could surpass $1.5 trillion by the end of the decade if current spending habits continue. Experts are warning that this surge in borrowing is putting a massive strain on the country's future economic stability. One of the most alarming aspects of the report is the claim that Canada's financial troubles can be traced back to years of fiscal mismanagement. Critics argue that Trudeau's government has failed to balance the budget, relying heavily on borrowing rather than addressing long-term fiscal responsibility. The report highlights a series of wasteful government spending initiatives, many of which were not adequately planned or scrutinized, that have contributed to this growing deficit. A significant portion of the report criticizes the lack of accountability within the government. Trudeau's administration has been accused of ignoring the financial analysts. The most recent figures show a deficit of around $60 billion. A figure that is expected to increase in the coming years unless drastic changes are made. The debt-to-GDP ratio has now exceeded 100%, meaning Canada owes more than it produces in goods and services. The report warns that this ratio could rise significantly if government spending remains unchecked. If current trends continue, experts fear that Canada will face a financial crisis within the next decade. The report predicts that by 2030, Canada's debt-to-GDP ratio could rise to 120% or more, leading to higher interest rates, potential credit downgrades, and an overall economic slowdown. The leaked report lays a significant portion of the blame on Prime Minister Trudeau's policies, particularly his expansionary fiscal approach. Trudeau's government has been criticized for its heavy reliance on increased public spending without addressing structural economic issues. While some argue that his spending initiatives were meant to stimulate the economy, the report contends that they have only deepened Canada's financial woes. Key policies under Trudeau's leadership, such as large-scale government investments and emergency pandemic relief packages, have resulted in a massive increase in debt. Although these measures were crucial during the pandemic, the report argues that the government failed to scale back spending once the immediate crisis passed, thus exacerbating the debt situation. Furthermore, the report mentions the failure to diversify Canada's revenue streams or rein in corporate tax loopholes, which it claims have led to a lopsided tax system that unfairly burdens the middle class while large corporations continue to evade taxes. But how has the Trudeau administration responded? The government has sought to counter the claims made in the report. When the leaked report first emerged, the Trudeau government quickly dismissed its findings as overblown and politically motivated. Within hours, spokespersons for the government were echoing the same defense, that the country's financial situation was not as bad as the report made it seem, and that any claims of bankruptcy were misleading and false. The government's tone was one of reassurance. Officials emphasized that Canada's fiscal policies were designed to weather economic downturns and that the country's long-term prospects remained strong. Their immediate response was an attempt to downplay the severity of the debt crisis and to shift focus onto the positive economic indicators, such as falling inflation and lower interest rates, which they argued demonstrated that Canada was on the road to recovery. Several prominent cabinet members, including Finance Minister Chrystia Freeland, were quick to address the leaked report in public statements. Freeland, a key figure in the government's economic decision-making, made it clear that she rejected the notion that Canada was heading toward bankruptcy. In a press conference, Freeland stated, "This report is nothing more than a misleading attack on the hard work and dedication of Canadians who have come together through the toughest of times. Canada is not bankrupt. Our economy is recovering, and we're focused on growth and stability moving forward." She also highlighted the government's commitment to reducing deficits over time, claiming that Canada's debt-to-GDP ratio was still manageable compared to other G7 nations. Other members of the cabinet, including Minister of Innovation, Science and Industry François-Philippe Champagne, made similar sentiments, emphasizing that Canada's economic fundamentals were strong. They pointed to government efforts in areas like technology innovation, job creation, and climate change investments as evidence that the country's financial trajectory was on a sustainable path. However, the responses were seen by many as part of a broader damage control strategy. Critics argue that these assurances do little to address the systemic issues highlighted by the report, especially in terms of mounting debt and the lack of a comprehensive long-term fiscal strategy. As the government tried to contain the fallout from the leaked report, a heated debate started about whether the claims of impending financial collapse were exaggerated or based on factual analysis. On one side, the Trudeau government and its supporters argue that the report's portrayal of Canada's financial situation is a gross exaggeration, designed to stoke fear and undermine public confidence in the government. They point to historical events like Canada's recovery from the 2008 financial crisis as evidence that the country can handle large deficits, especially in times of global uncertainty. Supporters also argue that significant social investments, like those made in healthcare, education, and infrastructure, are long-term investments that will strengthen Canada's economy over time. On the other hand, critics claim that the report's findings are based on solid financial analysis and that the government's refusal to acknowledge the true extent of the debt crisis is a dangerous denial of reality. Financial experts and economists have warned that Canada's growing debt could lead to higher interest rates, reduced government services, and lost investor confidence, which could trigger an economic slowdown. Some have even suggested that Trudeau's spending policies and focus on social welfare programs have worsened the country's debt situation to an unsustainable level. The Trudeau government, in an attempt to soften the blow, has committed to releasing additional fiscal projections in the coming weeks to reassure the public that their policies are leading Canada toward financial stability. However, the opposition parties and many economic analysts remain unconvinced, calling for greater transparency and a clearer plan to address the country's mounting debt before it becomes a long-term crisis. With increasing debt, the government may face difficult decisions about funding social programs like healthcare, pensions, and unemployment benefits. As the deficit grows, mitigation measures could become a reality, leading to cuts or delays in public services. This could result in longer wait times for medical treatments, reduced funding for social assistance programs, and potential rollbacks on key government initiatives aimed at helping vulnerable populations. The opposition parties have taken advantage of the leaked report to hold Prime Minister Trudeau and his government accountable for the country's financial situation. Pierre Poilievre, leader of the Conservative Party, wasted no time in condemning the government's fiscal policies, labeling them as reckless and irresponsible. On the other hand, Jagmeet Singh, leader of the NDP, has criticized Trudeau for not investing enough in public welfare programs, like universal pharmacare and affordable housing. He proposes that the government increase taxes on the wealthiest Canadians and invest more in healthcare and housing for low and middle-income families. Canada's debt crisis isn't happening in isolation. Other G7 countries like the US, the UK, and Germany also face significant fiscal challenges. But Canada's situation is unique due to its higher debt-to-GDP ratio and the relatively slow pace of economic recovery compared to some peers. While the US is battling with rising debt, its strong economic growth and global trade influence cushions some of the negative effects. As Canada's debt grows, international investors may view it as a higher risk market. This could lead to reduced foreign direct investment or higher borrowing costs for the government. Additionally, trade relations with key partners, especially the US, could be impacted if Canada struggles to maintain fiscal discipline. Many Canadians, especially those already struggling with the cost of living, are becoming increasingly critical of his government. Public opinion polls show a growing dissatisfaction with Trudeau's leadership, particularly concerning his fiscal policies, with many questioning whether his prioritization of social programs over economic reform has worsened the country's financial situation. Economists and financial experts suggest several approaches the government could take to steer Canada away from further financial decline. Fiscal discipline is a primary recommendation, focusing on reducing excessive spending and ensuring that public funds are allocated more efficiently. Additionally, experts emphasize the need for tax reform, aiming to ensure that the tax system is fair, sustainable, and fosters economic growth. Some advocate for cuts to government spending, particularly in areas where services could be streamlined without drastically affecting the public. While some argue that swift strategic action could still restore Canada's financial health, others suggest that the damage may already be too significant. Public skepticism over Trudeau's ability to lead such reforms could hinder progress. His track record of prioritizing social programs over economic growth could also make it difficult to shift the country's focus without alienating key voters. The ultimate question remains: will Trudeau and his government be able to implement meaningful reforms in time, or has the damage already been done? The future of Canada's economy will likely depend on bold action and a shift in priorities, but time is running out. Can the Liberals regain control of Canada's financial destiny, or is a period of economic hardship inevitable? What do you think? Let us know your thoughts in the comments below.